Hi, everyone. It's 12:30 my time and another time your time probably. I'm Lani Blechman and I haven't been using Zoom very much lately, so hopefully I will get this screen sharing thing going. But I'm excited to talk to you all about translanguaging, which has really revolutionized how I teach as a school librarian and lead my library. And I want to talk about creating school culture through library leadership that welcomes all language assets. I'm the librarian at Fort River Elementary School in Amherst, Massachusetts. And I shared the link to view this presentation in part because all of the resources or references that are freely available are linked here, and so you can have that. And I just wanted to note that I am going to primarily talk about using Espanol as a way to welcome all languages. Our elementary school is growing a dual language program with English and Espanol, and we currently are K-2 with our program, and we're adding a grade every year. So wait, how do I go to the next slide? Do we just click on it? Yay, okay. So I want to talk about what is translanguaging. ¿Qué es translanguaging? ¿Por qué school culture? ¿Por qué translanguaging? Give you some context about what we've been doing and talk about how to do it. I've focused mostly on teaching and leadership roles of libraries and librarianship, and talk about the struggles and the gossip on what's good. I don't talk a lot about library administration, finding resources for the library, funding resources, curating, cataloging, in part because I've done a lot of sort of this like discussion not with librarians, so this is really fun for me, for all our librarians out there. And talk about what is exciting. So Español también, when a student asked me this really was one of my first, or when a student demanded this of me, it made me realize how this was working well. So ¿qué es translanguaging? Last week in the pre-forum, Dr. Medina was mentioned, and I think he explains it well. And so I'm going to share a very short TikTok video, which I also think using TikTok is its own form of translanguaging.
When a child says, "My mom is planching my clothes," we say, "Oh my goodness, look at you moving the parts of language that you needed." Do you know what you just did? You moved planchando and you moved ironing and you combined them to say planching. I love that. That is fabulous. We want to keep that. We want to sustain that. But we also want to expand your language bubble. So we're going to go ahead and add planchando and ironing so that depending on the context, you can say, "My mom is planching," because we love planching, but you can also move planchando and ironing. "Mi mamá está planchando," or "My mom is ironing my clothes." Mira, mira, translanguaging away.
So I also think Dr. Medina is brilliant. And to give you another resource to think about what is translanguaging, this is from a CUNY guide that I find it is very accessible and useful. And so I just want to highlight, it says here, how can I see it? Translanguaging refers to the language practices, the actual practices of bilingual people. Indeed, what is taking place in a bilingual family in their homes are their flexible use of their linguistic resources to make meaning of their lives and their complex worlds. This is what we call translanguaging. So it's authentic, just using the language resources you have to communicate. And people use the word translanguaging in different ways. I'm not an academic, and so I think I often confuse people with the ways I use it, but it means different things. What we're going for is creating a culture where authentic integration of how our brains think, the words that come up in our brains are what we say. But to model this, I think we need to create the context in our schools that aren't our homes where we're most comfortable, or where we're most used to. Maybe they're not comfortable. We need to like sort of contrive and so model things that maybe aren't authentic, but allow that authenticity to come out. So why do I want to talk about school culture? School culture is a reflection of the world. We bring that with us into our schools, but we also create it and reflect what's outside, and we can reflect something different. So as an example of like the social context that is coming into our schools that we can choose to hold off or to reinforce. This is an NPR story, the day a Texas school held a funeral for the Spanish language. And in this story, these two lovely humans here are reflecting on the school that they went to, where they've literally had to attend a funeral for the Spanish language. And that is the history that we all have lived, continue to live in our country, where languages that are not English, even though English is not officially nationally our official language, those languages are literally actively destroyed in many different ways. And this is the context that we're living in. We can see that in policies. Official segregation and assimilation policies come up in lots of different ways, specifically in education. And these policies not only kill the languages that we all have and bring with us, but they add low expectations to bilingual students and students of color. And let's see, there was No Child Left Behind in 2002, Race to the Top in 2009. Both prompted bigger focus on students who are learning English and students with disabilities to be able to meet the standards. But the standards aren't reflecting necessarily what their needs and what their assets are. New imperatives for them to do well doesn't mean that the context is created for them to do well. Still, it's fortunate that there's more focus on that. But if you look at like the Common Core state standards, the hundreds of pages, there's only 2.5 pages where English language learners are mentioned. I love the chat. Keep it going, everyone. Oh, and so some of this is a little plug from this chapter here, which is not openly available, so it's not linked here. ¿Por qué translanguaging? So translanguaging creates a culture of respect for students' whole identities, not just our language identities, but lots of different aspects of ourselves. It also grows bilingual literacies of L1, so the first language, and the development of one literacy supports the development of other literacies. Translanguaging utilized in schools builds deeper thinking, affirms multiple identities, engages bilingual students with more rigorous content, develops language that is adequate for specific academic tasks, and enhances cognitive, language, and literacy abilities. We can see here some more researchy based things on how this is supported and supportive. Bilingualism or multilingualism is not simply one language plus another language. You don't reach full bilingualism because our languages are all different. We bring different varieties. And so acknowledging how all of our languages are different is an important cultural shift. The Common Core state standards expect bilingual students to demonstrate the exact language competence of monolingual English speakers and to use English according to monolingual norms. But this stance ignores bilingual people's different language competence as well as their diverse language practices. There's some great quotes here to like get you on board among English language learners, both L1, aka first language vocabulary, and L2, so presumably English language vocabulary, contribute to achievement in English reading comprehension. And teachers can play an important role in making this happen with families and working with families, encouraging more language practices at home, because home language culture is so important for our students, and bringing that sense of self to school is essential. So the context that I'm coming from, I am a emerging bilingual in that I have some Spanish language skills, but I don't ever imagine that I will be comfortable being a Spanish language teacher in our dual language program. I don't feel confident in my language abilities in that way, but what I can do is provide a model for translanguaging, provide access to and modeling the use of Espanol in library learning and in our school culture via translanguaging. And that balance is hard, teaching in Spanish versus encouraging translanguaging. But some of the background I have in trying this out, in doing this, includes being certified as a dual language teacher, not as a Spanish language teacher, but in dual language programming, being involved in the leadership team of our school before the dual language program started. And this year I led a learning community at our school that was about changing school culture to support translanguaging. And I've also been involved in managing a multilingual district grant as it applies to our libraries. So I mention all of this because I've been able to implement much of this work school-wide, because I work with the entire student population and staff population at our school as the librarian. As librarians, we know that a major part of what makes us effective is taking leadership roles outside of what people think of as our job. As an example, I was not part of the dual language program leadership team this year, which is a stipended role, but I was voluntold to lead the learning community that we did. Also, this presentation is based on what I shared in these various contexts. And the certificate program that I was in, I attended and achieved alongside of my current interim principal and assistant principal, which has been really important for that leadership piece. This presentation is also based on the work that I led with this learning community. Sorry for the trash pickup. The goals of our learning community are important, I think, for giving you some context on the work that I've done with translanguaging. And we really wanted to look at language as a way of doing anti-racism work and of changing school culture. And our work together, I summarized very poorly because I just couldn't summarize it. There was so much in this document here, which I want to share with you all to later on get some of your feedback on what you think is useful and worthwhile. So at Fort River Elementary School, I'm part of the specials team, art, library, music, PE, tech, and we teach all classes and students for approximately 40 minutes per week. And this is as prep time coverage for our classroom and special education teachers and duty coverage for special education paras. And so we don't have, while we have co-teaching, we don't have co-teaching and specials. And so we're kind of on our own during that time. And that means that's a struggle. There's various arts integration initiatives that are in name and not supported. But really what's exciting is we do a lot of awesome teaching. Our school is in Amherst. Our school motto is Elegimos al Amor, we choose love. We're kindergarten through 6th grade, although our 6th graders are leaving us soon. And in addition to our growing dual language program, our school hosts 2 of the district's 3 special education inclusion programs. Building Blocks is a therapeutic program designed to use relationships building to help kids learn emotional and behavioral regulation skills so they can learn, develop friendships, and develop a positive self-concept. The belief is that this is primarily done through relationship building, and AIMS takes a similar approach with pragmatic adjustments given the population students on the spectrum. So we have a lot of specialized programs and specialized populations. And you can see some enrollment figures based on how the dual language program and pandemic may have changed some things. That was a big one. If you look at the populations of our school, generally with all the indicators on the report card for our school, and our district is more diverse than the state, more racially diverse, more academic and socially support needs. In terms of economic disenfranchisement, our school, it has greater needs than the district and greater than the state. And same thing with high needs students. Our school is greater than the district's needs, greater than the state. I'm not sure what I wanted to say about this, but we have a high percentage of students with disabilities. In terms of students of color, our district is more diverse than the state. And if you look at the diversity of Fort River, we're a little less diverse, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of the diversity within our diversity, because we have a greater percentage of Latinx students. But we have an overall, we are over 50% students of color. And our English language learners hover around just under 15%. In our district, our English language learner programs include some interpretation services, our dual language program, which is at our elementary school, and other, and biliteracy seals, things like that. And this is my library, in case you're wondering. It was under a tent last year. I wheeled things out every day, and my students, you can see them with their book bags against the wall, and we are back inside, so that's a little visual of my library. Not all of Amherst is stuck in the 70s, but our school building sure is. And the dual language program has very strict language allocation plans, which makes translanguaging a challenge and even more important. So one of the struggles that I've come across is that the students end up mimicking what they're learning of these strict language allocations and what they're hearing from the world, that English is important. So things like library is supposed to be in English. This year actually was the first year that I've heard this come from my students in a sustained way in 3 years of the dual language program. And it came up across grades. So it was coming up with our purple students, our monolingual students, questioning the inclusion. And I realized in articulating my goals for dual language education in my library that they apply to our Spanish, our monolingual classes as well, that language inclusion is important for everyone. So I had to come up with solutions to this, like library is supposed to be in English, coming from both my dual language and my monolingual students. And so I articulated some things to do and to see how it would go. And been working on all of these. I'll show you some examples. So how? It's important that we practice translanguaging and that we develop it and have adults who model it. And we do that so that it can happen naturally. We do choice so that students can practice, encourage students to use translanguaging in any and all language and literacy practices. And that one is really hard to get lots of staff on board with, and hard to retrain ourselves to do that. Another way to do it, partnering bilinguals who can authentically practice. That's a good way too. So some things that our district talks about in terms of ways that we can support language development that lead really well with translanguaging: visuals, gestures, pre-teaching, lenguaje oral y repetición. That is like key and really fun. Doing cognates and being the bridge, which is something that that we talk about in dual language education, the bridge between English and Spanish. But I see the library and a dual language school that has a program that's dual language, but not the full school, as being the bridge between programs as well. So trying to get some more examples. So I realized as I started doing this, and I started doing this before our dual language program, I knew it was even a thing that was being thought about, is that the work is never done. There's more to do. So for instance, I thought, like, I have a bilingual story walk. I'm like, I'm good. And then I realized my signs for the bilingual story walk were all in English. What am I doing there? I'm not modeling a different way to use language. And so I keep growing. My family communications are all in English and in Spanish, and I try to privilege the Spanish language, but also make it visually easy to navigate if you are really needing one language. Read alouds can be really fun and should be, and can be used with all of our students to model more than just English being a part of our learning. So finding existing resources as translations can be great and fun, but they're limited in that the authenticity of the language and the language use is not as great, and culturally then are not as authentic. Then things that I haven't found with translations, I've been making them into translanguaging text. So for instance, with Curious George, Librarian for a Day, only found it in English. So on each page, I have a prompting question, or yeah, for most part, a question that is in Spanish and Espanol, so that we can talk about it in English and in Spanish. I discovered that some read alouds are really, really too long, doing them in both languages. Like, it's almost too long. Some of the books are just too long in one language for me, but you don't have to read a whole thing to make it something that you're using. And so engaging with the text in different ways can be really important to bring in more languages and more engagement. And we need to be really active in what we do in our teaching. Probably everyone knows that for everything, but there's lots of ways to make language, put it in our bodies, and make it fun. So going off of, not Rosie Revere, the one I just showed you, but looking at how different texts in multiple languages can be used without just like passively listening. I did an activity with a database, PebbleGo, for Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month, where we discussed what do Latinx and Hispanic people look like by looking at the biographies on PebbleGo. We weren't listening or reading all of them, but we were engaging with the information. And then we like compared that to what languages are spoken in our staff at school, getting to know where you could use your different language assets. In terms of like really active culture creation with my classes, I did, particularly my monolingual classes, we did some fun read alouds with English and Spanish, and then then reflected on it. So, and I reflected back to my students what they said about how does it make me feel to listen to English y Espanol. Thanks, Daniela. And that has been really powerful. I keep working on it, incorporating Spanish more and more. And it's hard in part because my Spanish language skills are not fluent. And I tend to be wordy in English anyway. But the active teaching and reinforcement is important. And so I review with all my students often, how do we find books in Spanish in our library? I ended up creating this spine label for our books in Spanish because all of the spine labels that I saw that were available for books in Spanish were in English. They said Spanish on them instead of Espanol. And so, so direct instruction is important with frequent reminders. And that is one example I'll show you soon of right here of how then when I introduced our growing more languages collections, they knew right away how to find things because of this visual familiarity. So I've been working on making things more visual, accessible, both in our catalog and on our shelves. And so for Asian and Pacific American Heritage Month, when I was talking about books in Korean, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, and Khmer, I didn't have to explain to my students what these visuals meant. They were like, oh, that's how we'll find books in these languages, of course. And our library is not just in our library. It's no longer under a rainy tent all the time, but going out into the community is important. And again, another example of how we can model for our whole school communities, how family communication can bring in lots of languages and not be click on this link for this other language, but we'll tell you that in English. So hopefully you know to click on that link. This was my student who reminded me when I was forgetting to model the use of Espanol in the library that I needed to do more Espanol también, and has been really important for me. There's a lot more I could say about that, but for time. So another thing that I learned from the teachers that I worked with is while we know that authentic texts are really important, going back with Dr. Krashen also, we need cute, fun things too. And if you wanted to peruse this again, this summary, I would love to get your feedback on this document and comment form on what you're seeing going on in your context, what you have questions about, what sounds exciting or effective to you. And another example of how I felt like translanguaging and changing school culture was being effective is I got this email from a colleague, a PE teacher who only speaks English, who was thanking me for helping her see how she can be part of this cultural change. And so we need to normalize the use of multiple languages, and we can and need to model it. And there's lots of fun ways to do it. Sorry I talk so much. Anyone have anything to say in 1 minute?
Well, Tom had a quick question. In what ways has technology enabled you to do the great work you are doing in this area? And then for honoring the time.
I can be really quick with that. I really like tumble books in Spanish for teaching my students how to use visual read alouds and having them make choices for languages, or for English or Spanish mostly, because their other language collections are very small. I also like Google Translate and DeepL Translate are huge in everything that I do. I like pretty much can't always have the forethought to get the translations from authentic translators that our district has in time. So I have to use that a lot. And those are like the two big ways that I think, like technology. Also, teaching those tools, particularly for English learners who are starting at older grades, so that they can create Google Slides about how they want to change the world in their own language. That is huge too. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for that great question, Tom.
Thank you very much for presenting. This is very interesting. Okay, so we have our next presenter set, and I am going to share my screen for them. Thank you, Lani. That was amazing. I feel like I said your name wrong too, so feel free to correct me.
You actually said it correctly. It's Lani, like Danny. Thanks.
Oh, yay for me. Some people call me Danny sometimes. Okay, and I'm just getting this presentation up and ready. Nicole, are y'all ready?
Yes.
Okay, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having us. So Mr. G is teaching. And I don't know, he said something about a bookathon. He just could not get out of it. You know, we're an hour later here in the district. So it's 1 o'clock for us. And there was something that he had at 1. We were on the phone last night just saying that there was no way that he was going to be able to join. So at any rate, I will present for DC Public Schools on behalf of Mr. G and me. So again, this is like a little bit of a different way of going about this because I am the manager of the ESL middle school programs in DCPS. And so therefore I'm in all of the middle schools and what we call education campuses that are K-6 as the middle school manager. And then of course I do some things in the high schools as well. But in that work, I partner with people. And I think this is a really great illustration of the partner not always having to be the ESL teacher. And so I've been working with Mr. G at Brooklyn Middle School as a partner with the emphasis on multiculturalism and inclusion. And so what I wanted to do was just go over the presentation. And actually, if any of you were here for Lani, there's some similarities, and then have really some time to ask questions so that potentially if there's anything that we're doing in DC that would help you and your students in your district, we would love to share what we're doing, because I don't know if it's a magic bullet, but I also will say that my relationship with Mr. G at Brooklyn is very different than what I have in other schools in terms of my relationship with the librarian and or other content or ESL teachers. And so like just the lesson on that for me is that it's easier for me to work with people who want to work with me I think Mr. G is on. I just let him in. Mr. G? I think Mr. G might be on, but at any rate, so like if for example, I have a very different, hi, Mr. G. I was just saying that you were busy doing a bookathon, but you're here. But so one of the things I was saying to our colleagues in the presentation is just that this kind of relationship at Brooklyn with the ESL manager from central office is a little bit unique because you were very easy to partner with. And so we've done a lot of things together. And I was just saying that that doesn't always happen. So Mr. G, are you going to be able to be on for the half an hour? Because if not, I'll let you, speak for a little bit before you go back to school. Okay, well, I'll just take it from here, and then Mr. G, you just interrupt if you're on. But at any rate, so both of the pictures on our first slide are kids at the library, just one of them hanging out, and the other one, I believe that Mr. G had a station where they were doing some type of podcasts, and there's a couple more pictures, and the kids just love it. And these kids represent DC Public Schools. We're 88% Black, and then we have a lot of L's, and most of them are from Spanish-speaking countries. We also have a ton of kids who speak Amharic, so kids who are from Ethiopia. All right, and thank you so much for helping with the slides. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, great. So in this presentation, what Mr. G and I were thinking is like, okay, so what is this? And it's really a matter of Brooklyn Middle School, DCPS, under Mr. G's tutelage, like just being in the library and the librarian as a place of inclusion, innovation, and impact. And so this picture, I just pulled up, you know, when I'm in school, sometimes I snap pictures. I just happened to be in Brooklyn one day, and here we have the librarian, a student, a teacher, and a mother. And the mother is actually not the mother to this young man. And so they were just doing a teacher appreciation. It might've been close to Christmas holiday time. And I think that they had offered the international students, the L's, to make some traditional breakfast to honor the teachers during, you know, this stressful time of getting ready for vacation. And of course, you know, there's something going on with the families, and Mr. G was right there. So the illustration, I think, illustrates that, you know, we look at the library and the librarian as a place for inclusion, innovation, and impact. And I believe that my, you know, walking in one morning unannounced, and I see this going on, and there's the librarian right there with the kids right there. It just kind of illustrates that the community in which Brooklyn includes Mr. G, and that Mr. G has brought into the Brooklyn Library. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So Mr. G and I did a little bit of research. It was more like I was on the computer and he was telling me things, but just like in terms of like libraries' visions. And I think I pulled a couple initial thoughts from Wisconsin, but just that like the library's user-centered. And so when I think of that, and then I think of Brooklyn, and you'll see a couple more pictures as we go on, but like, it doesn't matter what month it is, there's Hispanic heritage books in a corner with some decorations and a place and, you know, an area of interest. The same thing, there's always an LGBTQ plus station area where there's books and places to go for information and local groups that are going on. And often these groups are in other languages or just places to get information. And so again, this is a picture I pulled off my library, off my phone. There was something going on. They were using the library as a space to discuss something. You see from the flag, it could have had to do with the diversity of our students. And I think this is like even multi-classrooms, just using the library as an additional kind of like all-purpose room or place to meet. Next slide, please. Right, and then again, like just this is an illustration. I know that Lani illustrated the same thing, but we have classroom discussions going on, and then stations. Of course, these are different classes, different grades, different days. But the reason why I pulled these was because if some of the colleagues on the call are familiar with like that UDL mindset, universal design for learning, it's that, you know, everyone has a place and everyone can participate in different ways. For example, podcasts. And what I like about this classroom discussion is that kind of circle where adults and children are sitting together comfortably. Like that's a very interesting way to conduct class. That's different than, you know, the way we typically think, where like the the professor or the teacher's in front of the room and everyone else is sitting and they're standing. So like that kind of discussion, UDL mindset is just a really nice place to learn. And then also, I don't know what they were doing again, but they did some type of a class whereby the kids then did work in the library in different stations. So again, this is very user-centered, right? Okay, next slide, please. And Mr. G, are you on, my friend? He probably just came on to say hi, because I know that like they have like a bookathon. There's something big going on in the school. And he said like he was so sorry, but he was with all the kids in the library. And I said we would understand. So, okay, so again, they have this, like I'm in the library and I'm like, what is that? Like, I feel like I'm at a bar mitzvah or a party. There's like this green screen and lights and camera. Well, they have these, they do podcasts. They talk about things in numerous languages. They bring in sometimes their parents or grandparents from other countries and ask them questions for the podcast. And then as you can see, like by both of these pictures, like this is a cool thing. Like we have multicultural kids hanging out together, buddies. And then we have some kids who I think speak the same language. I don't know what they're doing, but they feel compadre, they feel close. And there were like so many podcast pictures. I just, put these two on, but they illustrate the same thing, like this user-centered, happy community place, innovation. Next slide, please. Right, so collaboration. So again, remember I said I did like some research about libraries, and I think I borrowed from Wisconsin, but just like this idea of the library can be also, a place to collaborate. And so yesterday when Mr. G and I were on the phone, he was telling me, oh, someone was here today. I pretended like I knew who it was. I didn't know who it was, but I think it was like an author, a local author. He was so excited. And then he said, and of course I had the SPED kids there. And I said, of course. But so the point is like the school had brought in someone, again, I didn't know who it was, but he was invested. He was part of it. Like they might have like used his space, but he looks at that as like, oh, you're coming to my home. Like, let me make sure that my SPED kids are also coming to my home. Let me make sure that, the stations are set up. He was so proud of whoever was coming to the school. And again, like he made the library, that place of collaboration and inclusion for all. So I also, like when I said partnership with central office, that would be like, I'm in the building, there's a lot of other people in the building, and we were part of that kind of collaboration, cheerleaders, whatever we can do to support. Oh, the neighborhood, I wanted to tell you this because this is so great. So over summer school one day, I stopped by because they were doing a program at Brooklyn proper for L. So they were doing a summer school, like language content immersion program. And the kids weren't there. They were at the church looking at skylights. So I was like, cool. So I just walked across the street to the church, and they're like they're talking to the pastor in English about they had like a community kitchen there. So kids were asking a lot of questions. They were helping, divide some stuff, and they were asking if, they could come back. They brought some bread. And then they went and they talked a little bit about algebra and the skylights. So just a really good example of like the librarian bringing the community into the community and like being recipients, but also being distributors. And like now they not only, were looking at the lights and math, but they also met the leader of the organization. It's just like, we really use the community, but you have to walk to the church to study math, and then like other opportunities that make it even more that there's a community involvement happen. Next slide, please. Okay, so the other thing is again, like Lani talked about some great stuff when she talked about Pebble Go, because I love Pebble Go, and it's an elementary initiative, but I like it for middle school L's. But anyway, so Mr. G took the kids to the car show. I think, he found out there was something, or he made a phone call and got tickets. And then they took the metro and they went to the center and they went to the car show. And then here, I think like he just joined a gym class. Maybe one day the kids were playing soccer. Maybe they needed someone else on the team. Maybe the adult needed a pal to hang out. But like we look at I'm just telling you, at Brooklyn Middle School, the librarian is part of the community. He's going to coach, he's going to go on field trips, but not like as just the helper. Like he took the initiative and made the field trip. When I talked about the summer school, the ESL teacher and Mr. G were my two teachers. So I had the blessing of a librarian as my content teacher. So again, like just an example of like, and I know every district is unique, and I just said every school is unique, but this is a nice example of like a massive infusion of the librarian into all of the school culture, which then is really helping our students. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so just like one thing that we've done at DCPS, and I speak as a white woman, we do a lot of equity work because we are really trying to empower our students and empower our teachers. And in order to do that work well, we have to look at our own bias, the way we grew up, our own privilege. And so I just wanted to name, and this was like a really great illustration, if you can see it, but just it kind of speaks to a little bit of that self-study. So I just wanted to name that, you know, as I work with Mr. G and all of my students and teachers, I've made a couple of mistakes in my approach or the things that I've wanted or said, or I'm just saying that as a leader in DCPS, empowering all people, it's part of our practice to empower ourselves by continuously kind of learning about equity and the power of equity. And so I just wanted to name that because I also think that that's possibly part of the reason why I'm proud of our work. And I think that the work, I'm so proud of Mr. Actually Principal Richardson at Brooklyn for like kind of allowing us to infuse this multiculturalism into the school. But I just want to name that we all do equity work. And so if this seems interesting, it's because we've been like working on ourselves and understanding anti-racism curriculum for years. And Mr. G and I have a lot of information on that. So as we get to the end of the slide, we have our information, phone number, and you are welcome to be in touch. And I would be delighted to send any type of information or resources. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so here we go. Remember when I said, oh, like when Lani said, Pebble Go. So I also want to tell you like why like the librarian and the language acquisition department at DCPS is so strong. So the library, and because I know we talked about this at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago in terms of budget or budget constraints, but I found that the library pays for a lot at DC Public Schools. So brain pop, like I also like, I'm older, I love like the person and not the technology, or at least like the person there with the technology. There's so much opportunity for the kids to be alone on the computer. So I sometimes stay away from these approaches that, are online. But I had to lean in and do the best with what was going on during COVID and post-COVID. And Brain Pop, our library bought for everyone. We all have it. So what I did was I asked a teacher of mine who's an ESL teacher who I trust and I've worked with forever. She's very smart. She's like wonderful, just like Mr. G. And I said, like, can you check out these resources and tell me what you think? She got on the phone with Brain Pop, like gave them some recommendations to make some of the lessons more like language rich, or, looking at kind of when we look at language, reading, writing, speaking, and listening to be infused in the lessons. So like really to be language heavy. And also we have Brain Pop Espanol. So we love it. We put the kids on Brain Pop Espanol all the time to learn their native language before or before they learn a second language. That's a whole nother conversation. But again, really supporting what Lani was saying about translanguaging or that native language wonderful resource. We also have purchased by the library Brain Pop Espanol. We use it all the time. We also have Brain Pop Francais. We use that all the time. If there's some other languages that we don't have, like remember I mentioned Amharic, we have to use a different program or find something that would benefit them. But I'm also saying that I'm aware that by only having Espanol, we can't help everyone, but we can help a lot of our kids. So this is an example of another presentation that was done with our family engagement team. And I was showing them that we can do Brain Pop at home and that there's literature in Spanish or French for our families if they wanted to use Brain Pop either for themselves, the adults, or for their kids. And I wasn't trying to get them to like go to school. There were fun activities like, to ask your siblings their favorite animal, just like kind of SEL community building things. So at any rate, again, I know that it's different in every state, county, district, but I also just wanted to name that for me, like I also lean on the library. Like this Brain Pop, I put this in every school. My teachers are happy and then the kids are happy. So that was one example that something the library's given to all of us. Next slide, please. Thanks, Daniela. Okay, so the other thing is like, again, I'm in urban, like we're like the city, right? So we've got libraries here, there, and everywhere. My kids go to the library. It is not just at Brooklyn Middle School and my other schools in DC, but I mean like the public library, the Cleveland Park Library, the Chevy Chase Library, because it is a plethora of internet opportunity and books in multiple languages and people who will help you. So this is like a huge thing for us. Like we get our kids library cards, we make them go to the library. During this summer, remember I told you, Mr. G, they were looking at math at the church and then they ended up at the distribution center with the with the priest, which is such a great story. But they then one day they were doing yoga, but then another day they're at the Brooklyn Public Library because it's different scenery, different books, different contacts, different hours for our kids to also use the library as one of their safe places. Next slide, please. Oh, let me tell you one other thing about the library. No green card, no problem. No driver's license, no problem. You can get a library card and access to all of these wonderful things no matter what. And so we try to make that very clear to our parents and to our kids, because sometimes the parents want a library card also, but they don't realize, that if they have the documentation to get one, they can get a library card. I mean, I have to say, at least in DC and Maryland, I don't know in other states, but here we are very good to everyone about using the library with the card. Canopy, I tell all my friends, it's Netflix for smart people. I am absolutely addicted. It's the best resource ever. I wish I'd known about it 10 years ago. I use it for everything. The kids can use it. The families can use it. Teachers can use it. I don't know how familiar you are with Canopy, but I watched something the other day called One Child Left Behind about the cheating scandal in Atlanta. It changed my world. I loved it. I also watch all of the international films or the short films. Sometimes like you're tired, but you're not tired. You need a little something, but not 2 hours. They have these 20-minute movies and they're usually in other languages or they can be in other languages. I think Canopy is fabulous. And we use it for the kids all the time as a way to either watch a movie in their native language or watch a movie or a documentary in English. Subtitles are also a fabulous way to learn. We know in terms of fluency, sometimes even having the movie or the documentary or the show in English with the English subtitles, like I do that. It helps me sometimes if I can't hear, but we know from Dr. Krashton that that's also a good language exercise. Okay, and the next slide, please. I'm trying to leave a couple questions. Yeah, also the library, we have games, like not only at Brooklyn and at the other libraries, but at the public library. These are all language games. Like if you play any of these games, I mean, even my kids Uno, my newcomers, but they talk with Uno, but you know what? You can't have the confidence to speak unless you feel like you're part of a community. You have a friend, you have someone to support you. So I believe in community and like feeling safe before language anyway. So an amazing opportunity if you ever have some newcomers or you don't know what to do with the group. Sometimes just letting them enjoy each other's company, but like still with the game, it's language. It's great. Thank you for the thought in the chat that resonates. I'm so happy because I buy on Title I and Title III money, Connect 4, all my games because it works. So it's something for you to think about in the library. If you want, I also have lists of stuff. If you wanted recommendations, please be in touch with me. Okay, the next slide. And then I just wanted to tell you, remember when I saw Mr. G, like he wasn't there, they were at the church. So he taught summer school for me. So that is just an example again of like the librarian infusing themselves into the larger picture, and or central office looking at the librarian as like such a valuable, I mean, he's not the only librarian. Like now I hire librarians whenever I can, but Mr. G was kind of my first example of someone from the library teaching for me, and they're the best. I mean, we train them a little bit and then they train us a little bit, and it's a collaborative, very nice partnership. So next slide. And then I believe this is my last slide. I don't know what this picture is. Mr. G sent me this picture, but I want you to see why I put this picture as our almost last slide. I've got a kid, I've got the principal, some more kids, the librarian, and then a content teacher and some more kids at some type of a celebration. So that is community, that is equity, that is trust. And I'm just so happy that I can illustrate that in the middle of this middle school celebration of leadership, teachers, and children, I have the librarian. And then there is one last slide. I am Nikki Ugel, and this is my email and my phone number, and my very wonderful colleague and friend, Mr. G, as we all adoringly call him. This is his email and his phone number. So may I take any questions? Does anyone have any questions, please?
Hello, you're Marriott.
Oh, Mr. G is here. Woo-hoo.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I just want to say hi. Sorry, but because of the change in the on the presentation, I couldn't be here because if you see, I have my kids here. We're at the Battle of the Books for the district. So right now we're live in that competition. So thank you, Nikki, for everything. I mean, those words, I mean, you're wonderful. I just wanted to mention, like, for the what we're doing this summer, what I'm doing this summer, one, as a librarian, I'll be in the library curriculum team. So I'll be helping write the information literacy, because we don't have it yet, for our district, no? So, but my focus is going to be on that differentiation for ELs, and also how do I modify all this information literacy courses, like units that we're going to create. How do I modify and adapt them for our ELs? Also, like you talk about Brainpop ELL and Learning Ally, Coloring Colorado, all these applications that are out there that we can use. That's why we said that summer we just go and have vacation. We don't. We work. We all know that. We work a lot during the summer. So that's what I'll be doing for next year. Just looking at doing a survey of the technology that's going to be available for the district. And one thing I also like to do is get ready that letter to my faculty for next year. So it's like I create this draft I make these appointments for next year. So when it's time for co-planning and collaboration with my new faculty, I already have that out of the way. So the first week when they are here, okay, how do I have to integrate? We know that how hard it is for us to work with sometimes in the building with teachers. So right from the beginning, it's like, okay, where are we gonna meet? You know, how can I help you? How can we co-plan activities? Because I think that's important. You know, we have to be activists. If we really want to serve our ELs, we have to be activists, be out there, be proactive, and yeah, become that person that they need in the building. So thank you again. Sorry, but I have to go back to my battle of the books. But thank you. Bye-bye. Yes.
I mean, I think Mr. G's not being here is a really great example of, because he's with all the kids, like, you know, he's like, you know, when, you know, like you walk by and sometimes you say hello to the principal, like, or, you know, like a good principal is infused everywhere. Mr. G's like that. Like, he's just an additional, like, voice of leadership, but also of the people of the community. Like, if there's a field trip, he might be on it, because he's somebody that the teachers can count on and that the kids really can relate to. And yeah, so I'm very happy. Mr. G's, Dr. Washburn, who is the director of library services at DC Public Schools, he recommended to Mr. G and me to work with this group, and I was very honored. And if there's anything I can do to help in any way, but I also just want to repeat that this principal is like kind of all in, you know, like we bring people in and there's stuff in Spanish, and it took a while, because this is like a predominantly African-American school with a predominantly African-American community. And now we have like maybe 40 or 50 L's in the community of like 200. So we are working together really hard, and it's not always easy, but like to make Brooklyn a safe place for everyone, and for the community to be infused in like different languages and different colors, and that it's all important and okay. And I think that we're all trying to do that at some level in different districts and different schools, but I'm honored that Mr. G and Brooklyn, under the tutelage of his principal, you saw a picture of him, Principal Richardson, it's kind of working at Brooklyn. And so again, thank you so much for the opportunity. You have our information. It's really Mr. G, it's not me, but I appreciate and am honored to be part of the group. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for all of this information. And I love the way that you work with Mr. G. I put that in the chat, but it's nice to be supported as school librarians and to have people that celebrate us and listen to our concepts and our efforts. So you are appreciated, and I feel honored to have you as part of this group as well. Okay, so everybody, I'm going to stop this recording, and then guess what time it is? Lunchtime. And then we'll be back at 1 o'clock in this room. Thank you all. All right. Oh, and I'm not going to volunteer time, but if Nicole still wants to answer questions, I don't want to stop it. I think I need to put a discussion board up on Canvas.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay for a minute. And then what I'm going to do is just put it on mute until